Good morning, good morning. Let's just check that doesn't interfere with my microphone. No. Oh, it's a misty morning this morning. It's been lovely weather lately. I mean, considering it's like, late March, it's we had like a summer's day yesterday. It was 20 degrees. So the surgery's going really well. We've got no major problems, no major equipment failures, no major clinical problems. No, the GDC is sleeping like Cerberus. The staff are happy. We've had a few interesting cases. You always get interesting cases with dentistry. It's like when people say, "Oh, I don't know, how you can do it. Can't spend years staring into people's mouths." And in fact, that's absolutely not what the job is about. The job is all about problem solving. I had a chap in yesterday. He's a tradesman, and as in his 30s, I think, late 30s probably, and one of his lower incisors has fallen out because he's got gum problems. So he's a heavy smoker, and the other lower incisor was extremely loose. And my experience with extremely loose teeth like lower incisors is that people want to have them taken out. You think people want to pay the most and want the most to have the wisdom teeth taken out, but in fact, believe it or not, a loose lower incisor comes well above a wisdom tooth in terms of how much the patient's prepared to pay to get the problem sorted. I've told my story, haven't I, before, about how we get people to. I tell people if I get them numb, they can pull the tooth out themselves, and they never do. Or if I say to them, like, if you wait a week, it's going to fall out, so you don't have to pay me anything. And they never do. So anyway, we took this lower incisor out for him. He rang up late, and this is all about. I said 50%. I'd say 10% is what you get taught at dental school, which is just the actual procedure, the actual how to put a burr in a drill, how to drill a cavity, etc., etc. That is, at the most, is 10%. And then I'd say 45% is experience. In other words, what you know when you've been in the job 30, 40 years that you didn't know when you were been in the job 2 or 3. And then the other 45% is your people handling skills, your management skills, your empathy, your ability to read the patient. And you do get very good at that because, as I always say, you're going to get a patient in off the streets, perhaps at quite short notice, who's extremely nervous, perhaps has got little or no dental experience. Let me just look right, because this is a fast road. Go on, go, 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 go. Hooray! Little people have little cars. I don't know if big people have big cars, but so yeah. So you've got to get these people off the street. You've got to work out what their problem is. Work out, to their satisfaction, what the solution is. You then probably within 20 minutes of them walking through the door, just completely as a new patient, you then have to stick a massive grain needle in them. Sometimes. So, and the ability to do that is quite a unique skill, and you develop it and you get better at it. And it's not needed for every single patient, but I think what sets you apart as a good dentist, if you can read the room like that. You have to have a very good appreciation and really put yourself in the patient's skin. And you have to ask questions like, what is your biggest problem at the moment? Because it may not be what you would assume. Or what is your, if you was to wave a magic wand, and what would be the thing that you would fix? What would you, what solution do you want? Because again, it may not be that the patient's thinking along the same lines as you. I mean, this bloke, he's got loose teeth, he's got long-standing periodontal disease, and he's a dental non-attender. So I'm thinking acrylic partial denture, quick, easy, no technical overhead, flexible insofar as other teeth can be added to it. But he's not. He's thinking all on 4. He's thinking all on 6 or whatever. If I remember correctly, he'd been to Turkey and he'd had a quote for £6,000 or £7,000 per jaw, and that's what he wanted. And the problem was that he hadn't. His teeth are falling apart faster than he's saving them up the money. So that's why we're having to think of some sort of temporary solution. But then that sets up a tension, doesn't it? Because then you think he's thinking to himself, well, I'm going to have to weigh out over £1,000 for a temporary solution to something that probably later on in the year I might be going over and having all these teeth out. So why should I bother to pay to have them descaled? When I'm going to go and when they're all going to be taken out anyway. So after having a careful chat with him and finding out that he'd got 2 basic problems. One is he didn't like to have these. Well, we took the lower tooth out for him, the loose one. So he had his 2 lower central incisors missing, and he didn't like that. He didn't like the gap, obviously. So your teeth have got 3 functions, haven't they? You have to talk, you have to chew, and they have to look reasonable. And usually the looking reasonable is the last part. That's the third part that you sort of decide how that you're going to achieve that once you've done the first 2, the chewing mainly and the talking. The talking actually not too difficult because people can talk whatever. People can talk with no teeth. Your mouth is an amazing organ and it adapts to however many teeth you've got, usually in terms of the talking. And you can see people on the television with the most appalling sets of gnashers talking normally, I mean, it never ceases to amaze me that people who've got teeth that stick out in the front can talk normally, and people whose teeth stick out in the bottom can also talk normally, totally normally, because they've learned to make the word sounds with the different arrangements of teeth. And the teeth are necessary for making sounds. If you're going to make even the S in sounds, you're going to be using your front teeth, or the per, or the ver, certainly the ver, and the ter. I mean, with the ver, you're putting your lower lip on your top teeth to make that noise. So it very much does depend on where your teeth are, but you learn to do it. So with him, instead of it being the chewing and then the speaking and then the appearance, it was all the appearance. He was like, I just don't like this gap. So I said to him, well, I can make you a temporary lower acrylic denture, and that's the cheapest and quickest way of doing something. But I can't do it without descaling your teeth, because I'm not going to put a denture in around all the rotten gum disease you've got. So he understood that, but it does mean, as I say, for him, he's going to probably have to pay over 500 quid to have his teeth cleaned up. But which is probably he's probably going to spend slightly more, I would imagine, having his teeth cleaned up than he is having the denture made, which is sort of a bit of a oxymoron in a way, but. Here's a bloke who's never been to the dentist, or very, very infrequently been to the dentist. And so, and when he presents to you with basically advanced chronic period, oh, thank God that car's going straight on, honestly. I'll give her I'll give her a year before she's dead in a car smash, that whoever's driving that car. That was a bit harsh. So, I can't just say to him, no, I'm just going to pretend you haven't got gum disease and make you a denture around it, because if he was said, I'm going to Turkey at the end of the month or something, can you knock me up something just to fill the gap up until I go, then I might have been tempted. I've never done it in my entire practicing career, but I might have been tempted. But I can't ignore the fact that he's got a severe, advanced, chronic periodontitis that's led to the loss of his teeth at a very young age. That's how severe it is. It's about as severe as it goes. So I'm going to stick to my guns and say, look, this needs to be cleaned up. So, also, he came to us with quite a bit of baggage, because when we do our initial consultations at the desk, we don't do them in the surgery. I've always been a little bit unusual like that, in that I find it less confrontational and the patient is less nervous if you're just talking to them across a desk, like an administrative desk, rather than across than in the chair. In the chair, their fight or flight responses are already whirring up when they sit in the chair, because they're like worried that you're going to suddenly jump on them. They're worried that you suddenly jump on them and do something, or secondly, that you're suddenly going to jump on them and do some treatment that they haven't been forewarned about or can't afford. So we talk across the desk, and then they get quite chatty once we loosen them up a bit, and start chatting and possibly find a common subject to talk about. He's an electrician, and I just recently electrocuted myself. So that's what I kicked off with. You don't know where it's going to go from there, He didn't really want to talk about electricity. He was far more focused on his teeth and everything. So, and I've got to tell you the circumstances were that he rang us up about 3:45 and said, you don't know me, but I've got this really loose and painful tooth. Do you do emergency sessions? So I said to him, look, if you're nearby, then just come over. And he's, yeah, I am. I'm literally in the next street. So I said to him, well, just come over and we'll have a look. And he said, well, how much is it going to cost? Now, if someone says, how much is it going to cost? Then obviously, they're on a limited budget, aren't they? So, and I was, to be honest with you, I had a little bit of time before we were going to go home. And I was just genuinely curious. And this is how you pick up business like this. It's not like, some dentists will look at that and say, well, I'm not going to see him without charging him a checkup fee or something. But I'm thinking, well, this is new business, okay, if I can get him, he is investing in the appointment, in that he's possibly finishing work early. He said he had to go and pick up his kids from school. And so I said to him, well, go and pick them up from school and then come over afterwards. He said, what time do you close? So I said 5 o'clock. As long as you're over here before 5 o'clock, that's fine. And he managed all that, right? So what we've done is we've shown, I wouldn't say a considerable amount of flexibility, but certainly we're not rigid in terms of our arrangements. That's the great thing about, I think, you don't have to be a private dentist to run your surgery like that, but it certainly helps, especially when you have to go past 5 o'clock and sort of assume that the staff will stay on for 15 minutes, half an hour or something. So I'm like to him, no sweat, just come over and we'll have a look, we'll have a chat. How much is it going to cost? I said to him, I'm not going to charge you anything. I won't charge you anything. Just come over, we'll have a chat, we'll have a look. Perhaps I'll go through some options with you. Then that's fine. You want to leave it at that, then that's fine. So we came over, we got his details. We're saying that, before we went through to the surgery, again, he said to me, before we start, I've got to tell you something. Now, again, that's a very telling thing. You need to look out for that. Before we start, I need to tell you something. So watch out for these phrases, because that means it's something that's going to be significant, something that's going to have a bearing on the treatment, something that's going to have a bearing on him. Almost certainly it's some experience that they've had in the past, but it always gives you a steer and a clue as to how best to treat the patient. He said, I know my teeth are bad, my teeth are terrible. He said, and I think he said something like, I've fallen out with dentists in the past because they've been like really, like told him off about my teeth. He said, I don't need to be told my teeth are terrible. I know my teeth are terrible. He said, dentists have been quite rude to me in the past about my teeth. And I'm like, okay, so that tells you two things, doesn't it? One, that he's been to see a dentist who's really a bit sort of autocratic and insensitive to his patients, probably on the NHS, because he doesn't care, because you've got patients at the wazoo, so he can be as rude as he likes to them. And secondly, he's got some self-respect. He's like, he knows he's self-aware, and he is, oh, that rapeseed coming out over there. And he's like, he's like, I'm a human being, I'm an autonomous citizen, and I don't want to be treated like a child. And so which is fair enough. So now, here's another issue. It's a nice bright tractor, isn't it? I want to crash in the back of that. Could end up with rather a mangled car. So when you hear that a patient's been badly treated in the past, when they sort of complain to you about how they were treated in the past, and you listen to their story, now sometimes it'll be some old load of old cods, and they'll say something like, oh, I didn't go to my dentist for 10 years, and when I went back there, I'd been deregistered, and don't you think that's terrible? Don't you think they should have told me? And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, dentists have got not, funding and the time just to write to everybody who can't be asked to come in for a checkup and tell them that they've taken on some new patients to keep them busy in the meantime. I'm not very sympathetic with that. But if someone says to me, no, I've been disrespected in the past by a dentist because of my teeth, then that's really, I think that is unforgivable. And I'd like to say, well, I'm sure that the dentist didn't mean that, or the dentist didn't do that. But my suspicion is most of the time they bloody did. I think they were probably rude and autocratic and dismissive and generally treated him like a moron, and this bloke is obviously not a moron. So I hope this isn't a cue to get to work. So now what I do is, if I hear that someone has been treated like that, then I will immediately consider apologizing on behalf of the dentist, the previous dentist that has done that. I don't you might say, well, it's nothing to do with you. It wasn't you that did it that way. It was them that did it that way. But I do feel that as a member of the profession, I need to apologize on behalf of the profession when the profession has mistreated someone. Now, I'm not saying that I take what he's saying at face value and everything, and that that it's I'm agreeing with everything he's saying, but I do accept that he feels that way. Oh God, it's another Fiat 500, and he feels aggrieved, and he's got this grievance. He's brought this grievance, and every time he goes to the dentist, he thinks, I want some redress for the way, or rather, this profession routinely treats me with disrespect, and I just want to mark this dentist card, and I'm going to say to him, don't treat me with disrespect. And I think that's a burden on my shoulders, isn't it? I'm trying to be perfectly nice to him, and he's starting off by marking my card and saying, like, you know, oh well, what the hell was that? That was a big bang. But 8:39, and again. What a weird noise. Perhaps the Iranians are bombing Manston Airport. Maybe that's a bird scarer. I don't know. Anyway, I can't see bits of Scud missile falling out of the sky, so I think I'm all right. So, yeah, and he had to get it off his chest, you know. He was like, which is why they say, like, before we start, I've got to get this off my chest. My last dentist was a bit of a dick. So you have to listen to it carefully and say, okay, yeah. And I will say something like, well, I'm sorry that happened. You know, that's, you know, we shouldn't be disrespectful to patients. And I do honestly think we shouldn't. I mean, if a patient comes in and, you know, they've got a pretty appalling set of choppers, ours is not to judge them for it. You know, sometimes you can judge people for it. If you've been, you know, telling people to brush their teeth every 6 or 4 months for 10 years and they're still not even putting a brush on their teeth, then you can say to them, look, I'm, you know, in extremis, you can even say, well, look, I'm obviously not having no effect on you whatsoever, so I think you need to see another dentist. Or you can just say, look, are you going to change the habit of a lifetime and actually listen to what I say and brush your teeth, you know, and get a little bit more biting edge about your criticism. But for the most part, I don't judge people. I think that they are a product of their parents for the most part. And then once, not after their parents, it's I can't see anything that's blown up over there. And then after that, the profession takes over, doesn't it? And the profession might even take over before the parents, you know, if they've been put off as children, etc., etc. So I'm saying to him, yeah, well, you know, I'm sorry about that. But you have to find out a little bit more about it, and perhaps even look in his mouth before you really sort of reach a judgment. But certainly it's appropriate under those circumstances to say, look, all I'm going to do is have a look at your teeth. I'm not going to laugh or anything. I'm not going to judge you. I'm just, my objective really is just to get you in to go over your options and have a look and just give you an expert, you know, like give you the ability to judge your own situation as if you were an expert. I'll explain to you my thinking, I'll show you the x-rays, etc., and you can say, okay, yeah, Angria's he's not just told me what's wrong and what I need doing, he's shown me what's wrong and explained to me all the options with his recommendation, which, as I always say, don't forget, it's not the recommendation of what they should do, it's because you can't know what they should do. It's your recommendation of what you would do if you were in their situation. You say, if I was in your situation, if I had your teeth, this is what I would do. But that may not be what you would do. You know, you're autonomous person. So we went through, and his biggest problems, believe it or not, were not just the gap in the lower front teeth, but his upper front teeth were extremely imbricated, crooked, and he got quite a narrow upper arch and a class 2 division 1 occlusion, which means that his upper teeth stuck out a bit. So, and in order to get them themselves all in place, they've all twisted round. And because he's a heavy smoker, they're all quite dark. So his upper teeth were all dark and twisted. So he didn't really have a very nice smile. So we've got two problems: the gap and the fact that he doesn't like his upper teeth. And then we've got, against that, we've got this deadline of about a year before he thinks he'll have saved up enough money to go to Turkey and have them all out and have these all on 4. I was quite honest with him and said that I think by the time he's had his teeth cleaned up and a lower denture made, the idea of doing over 10 grand in Turkey might not be quite so attractive at the moment. At the moment, it's attractive. It basically just wants to throw his teeth away in the bin and start again with some false, with the superstructure, implant-based superstructure. Yeah, this is going to be like this all the way to work. This blooming queue. It's just because this is a choke point into Ramsgate, and it's there's only one road. Actually, I might be better off going left. I think if I go left and then try and cut round, if I go right and then try and cut round anti-clockwise, then it's going to be just as bad. Right, I need to make a quick phone call to work. I'll be right back. Right, back again. So you can see there's this, you'll have to bear with me because there's this, what is basically a simple case, but it's got all these really, really complex management aspects to it. Psychological, clinical, and then in a minute financial. So I said to him, I think, by the time by the time we get round to it, basically you're just a straightforward, never looked after your teeth, periodontal lower denture case. But if you want to insist on being treated as an implant case, then, fair enough. So anyway, he's going to have to find out about 1,200 quid, which is what I've quoted him for doing all his gum therapy and making him a temporary partial denture, lower. And if he insists on having the upper, and that doesn't even solve the upper problem, because if he really wants something done with his upper teeth, then he might need a partial upper denture. Now, that's the only thing that to me is a little bit weird, because he's Kendall Caravan Hire. Where do you think you're going? RJ Romeo Juliet 24 Foxtrot Zulu Sierra. He's just trickling right down the front of the queue like that. He's saying that he doesn't like his upper front teeth, but then obviously that is going to be sorted out by his all on 4. So I don't know why he's complaining about it so much at the moment. It's not, I know they don't look good, but it's not that they've just started not looking good. They've obviously not been looking good for the last 10, 15 years. And he's a heavy smoker, to the point where I knew he was a smoker as soon as he sat across the desk. So, and it may be, sometimes you have to think to yourself, well, perhaps people smoke a lot when they're going to the dentist. They hang around outside for 20 minutes and that smoke 20 fags in 20 minutes. But he's obviously like a heavy smoker, and so why would he keep going on and on and on about his upper front teeth if they're all about to be taken out within a year? And I think the answer is, at the back of his mind, he is trying not to have the implants. He's trying to think, is there another way of doing things? Is there a cheaper way of doing things? Or is there a way of doing things now instead of having to wait for a year? So that's why he's pressing me for a solution to his top teeth, which basically he doesn't need, or he shouldn't need, if he's being honest about what he's doing. Now, you can be misled by patients who say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you know, and that's just human nature. But when it affects your business, then it can be a bit of a problem. There's a certain amount of braggadocio involved sometimes. Like the one that I always cite is when patients say, "Oh, don't worry, you won't have any trouble getting the money off of me." They're the people who never pay. And patients who say, "Oh, well, you know, I know I've got bad teeth, but I'm going to have implants." That's like, you know, they're like saying, I know I've mucked things up my entire life, but I'm going to pull off a save on the goal line by coming up with the funds to do implants all round, implants for everybody, like Oprah Winfrey. You have an implant. You have an implant. Look under your chairs. You'll all find a set of implants. Here we are. Here's the traffic lights that's causing all the trouble. For what? For what? For one hole in the road, a gas. Oh, they had a gas leak. Yeah. Oh, do you know, if I'd only gone round the north, if I'd gone round the north side of the airport, I could have avoided all of this. Unbelievable. So there's this bloke, I mean, and you have to say to yourself, are you serious about, you know, you have to make a decision about whether or not he's serious about the implants. Is he is he serious enough for you to need to take it into account in your treatment planning? Or should you just assume that it's never going to happen? Do you know what I mean? Now, I must admit that I'm erring on the side of it's never going to happen. But again, because he's not, I say, quite an intelligent bloke, and it sounds like he's been to Turkey and had a quote, or at least, I don't know, got a quote out of the Daily Mail, that he's dead set on these implants. You know, he's like, no, this is what I'm going to have. This is what I'm going to have. And that's fair enough. Sometimes people do want the teeth they've never had. You know, they want to just get rid of the ones that God gave them and have another set that are given to them by some Turkish god, some dental god. Anyway, as he left, he said, "Look, do I owe you anything?" And by then I'd taken the loose tooth out, so I said to him, "Look, I'm going to charge you for the checkup, which is 78, which I thought was fair, because we'd done an awful lot of treatment planning. I referred him for an OPG. We discussed every option to death, restorative and prosthetic and implant, etc., etc. But I said, but you can have the extraction for free, which at the end of the day, it was just a quick squirt of local anaesthetic, and this tooth was falling out anyway. So, and he was quite happy about that. So I've sent him, as I say, I've sent him a quote for 1,100 quid for a proper prolonged gum treatment, as we used to call it, and a lower acrylic denture, which we'll make on site, which we can probably make in a day. So I mean, I'm sure he'll be pretty happy with the service that he's getting in terms of the amount of time it takes to make a denture. It'll be 2 days instead of the usual 4 to 6 weeks. Anyway, that's just one case. So it's absolutely not sitting in the surgery staring in people's mouths all day. If you're a dentist, I hope that's been of some help. If you're a patient, I hope that's been of some interest. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.